Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. As always, speaking with Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, at AH Malcolm on the X Twitters or Twitter X's, however you want to say it. Andrew Malcolm is here with us right now. And Andrew, how are you doing today, sir?
So far, so good, but it's early yet.
It is early. It is early. And you've got a couple of great columns up, looking at Rahm Emanuel. I read this column earlier today, and I wrote about him. I think it was about a week ago when Politico said that he was thinking about running for president. You take a look at that as well. And Trump vows to catch up to China's growing naval fleet. That was from Thursday of last week. So you got a couple of really great posts that we can talk about. But first off, we got to talk about what's going on in the media. I want to get to this John Kass column in a minute with the New York Times. But first off, I want to talk about what's going on with this campaign of domestic terrorism aimed at Tesla dealers, Tesla drivers, right? I mean, people just bought Tesla cars. Their cars are getting keyed. The drivers are getting assaulted. And the media is barely covering this. And to the extent that they're covering this, it's almost tongue-in-cheek. And I'll give you an example, Andrew. And I know you're going to appreciate this. Earlier today, maybe a couple hours ago, news broke that the Austin, Texas Police Department found incendiary devices at a Tesla dealership in the north end of Austin, right? Incendiary devices, by the way, means bombs, right? Fire bombs is what they found. And they didn't go off. They were able to get them. Maybe they're going to get some great evidence from that, and they can track down who's doing this. So this is not the first time over the last week or two that we're seeing this. Las Vegas, there was fire bombings of a Tesla dealership out there. And, ABC News actually covered it. Fox News, covered it. I think 3 or 4 local Texas TV stations covered it. I got mine from KXAN. The first alert I got was actually from Fox News, but I looked up KXAN so I could see what Austin station was saying about it and got a nice video report from them. The Dallas Morning News, and this is like 6 hours later, right? After the police had been out there. Dallas Morning News still didn't have anything on it at all, except, Andrew, an editorial cartoon that they actually ran this morning that showed a guy buying a Tesla Cybertruck and wondering if security services came with it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, but I just got done spending 4 years hearing about how January 6th, one day, one riot involving, an unruly crowd that really did get out of control, and it was an embarrassment. Shouldn't have happened. I've been hearing about that for 4 years. We're seeing people people doing coordinated firebombing attacks on Teslas just because Elon Musk is allied with Donald Trump. Yeah. And the media can barely be covered to talk about this.
Yeah. They have long ago forfeited, the legacy media has forfeited its right to the, what would you call it, the license. They have a responsibility to be a watchdog on government. They have not been. And now they're selectively covering news, not covering it if it doesn't fit the narrative, the preferred narrative.
Well, I mean, I didn't have any problem with covering January 6th when it happened, or the aftermath, or the investigations, but they treated that one violent incident. It was violent. One violent incident as somehow the end of democracy in America.
Yeah.
You've got a whole series of these violent attacks, and it's treated like, well, that's just local news. It's just local news. That's just somebody being a nut. Somebody's going to get killed with this. Eventually, somebody's going to get killed with this stuff, and it's pretty clear that there's some coordination going on here. There are indications already that there's funding behind this, and the only way that you know about this is to either read the Department of Justice's, releases, which you trust or don't trust, whatever, or you look at independent media platforms because the mainstream media is simply refusing to do anything about this except saying, oh, there was a firebombing last night. Well, it's fine. And now on to
Yeah.
sports.
No, I know it's shameful. Yeah, there should be a stronger word. I can't think of it right now, but it's it's
Disqualifying?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. It's they did the same thing to Hunter Biden's laptop. Just oh well, that's obviously something else that it wasn't, because they didn't want to report it. You know, there has always been some of this kind of petty, but it was petty bias in big city newspapers, especially when they became monopolies. You know, the publisher's wife was head of a charity, let's say. So that charity got a lot of coverage. Okay. Um, the Some socialite, this happened to me a couple of times in New York. Some socialite is a friend of the editors. And so as a slump, I got sent to cover her afternoon tea or whatever the hell it was. Um, so there's been that kind of stuff. Great coverage of the editor's son's football team. The other ones can just go fly a kite. But I mean, that's petty. It's not appropriate, but it's petty. This stuff is corrosive. And if, as you say, somebody's funding it, I can think of a couple of suspects. It's just, it continues what this whole woke thing is, to try to corrode and crumble the foundation, the social and cultural foundation of the country, to disrupt trust in each other, trust in our institutions, and to the extent that woke is still here, it's working.
Well, and the question is, how long is it going to survive? I mean, we just,
Well, yeah, but
I don't know how much you've been following the Snow White saga, but just got its ass kicked at the box office.
Yeah.
I know that. I mean, it made 43 million or 44 million, depending on which projection you're looking at. But the thing costs at least 300 million to make, plus probably at least another 100 million in distribution and PR costs. And I mean,
well, they'll take it in depreciation, or they'll write it off somehow. Those stories, those movies, they're like years in production. So they saw that one as, oh boy, this will sell. Back when Biden and the woke was hot. Oops, but that came to an end.
Yep. Well, at any rate, though, I mean, you take a look at the way that the media is not covering the Tesla domestic terror attacks, right? And again, it's not just the dealerships that they're attacking; it's people who just own the cars. There was a story in Seattle. You can get this from local news. You're not seeing it from national news. In Seattle, there was a woman who, this man drove around her, slammed on the brakes, and came at her. She was videotaping the whole thing, calling her a Nazi for driving the Tesla. Now, this guy was in camo and had a mask pulled up over his face. And the best part of this whole thing is he's driving an SUV. Which up until about, I don't know, a hot second ago, people on the left wouldn't be caught dead in an SUV because you're killing the planets.
Sheryl Crow and somebody else sold their Teslas. So
Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly.
Right.
At the same time that Elon Musk was rescuing those two astronauts
that he once was,
right? He was selling his Tesla to buy an SUV. I think Chevy Equinox, if I remember correctly, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with Chevy Equinoxes either. But I mean,
it's hypocritical. Typical hypocritical.
It's absurd. They bought these things for virtue signaling when they bought them, right? I'm saving the planet by buying, So now you got an American manufacturer that's actually succeeding at selling EVs, which is not easy to do. and they're trying to destroy him because he's aligned with Trump. It's just, the whole thing is absurd.
And they're not cheap.
No, they're expensive. I have a neighbor who has one. He loves it. It's not my type of thing because I sometimes go on long car trips and I just can't rely on.
I would buy a hybrid, but I would never buy an electric car. Totally.
No, I mean hybrids, yeah. I mean, but yeah, totally electric. It's fine if all you're going to do is drive around in town, right? And you got a charging station in your house, and you can charge it in an unattached garage, because these, not Teslas so much, but other EVs tend to catch on fire. But yeah, I mean, again, it's not my cup of tea, but that doesn't make any difference. I don't think that people should be bombing dealerships because they disagree with the guy's politics. This is literally terrorism, trying to force Elon Musk to stop participating in Trump's.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very corrosive, and it's meant to be, and fearful. Yep.
It's meant to instill fear, which hence terrorism. All right. So with that in mind, with the media angle of this in mind, you sent me over a link, and I just had a chance to go through it over at johnkassnews.com. John Kass is a almost, I can say, legendary Chicago columnist, right? I mean, I've been reading him since I first started blogging, off and on. You know, I've always enjoyed John Kass's writing.
Yeah, he's a modern day Mike Royko. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. He is definitely carrying Mike Royko's
or Jimmy Breslin, yeah.
If you're a New Yorker, Breslin would be a pretty good analogy too. But Kass is Kass. He's a lot of fun. This one over at his own site, johnkassnews.com. I don't know if he's still a columnist at one of the local papers.
No. He went out on his own a couple of years ago, and then he had very, very serious illness that almost ended the whole show. But he's come back. It's a long recovery, but he's come back, and he's writing up a storm and took on my former employer with the headline, was it the New York Times is killing America or something?
Oh, the New York Times is killing America. And I love this because I actually flagged this myself. And you and I were joking around about it before we started recording the podcast, right? Because they ran this story about, and it wasn't even a story, right? It wasn't even an editorial under the.
You're talking about the Times.
The Times, right? We were badly misled on COVID origins, and it was Zeynep Tufekci that actually wrote the column. So it wasn't even in the New York Times House Voice, right? They let Zeynep do this, and Zeynep writes this. Oh, we were badly misled. We were told that it was this was a zoonotic transfer, and it's like, are you guys effing kidding me? We didn't know. The evidence didn't come up until later. No, the evidence was there right then. We were writing about the evidence.
Yeah,
we already knew that the Wuhan Institute of Virology,
which is 2 blocks from a wet market.
It's 2 blocks, the epicenter of where this thing started, right? Well, now we know that actually the first people to get sick were the people working in the lab, which tells you that it was a lab leak. But we knew most of that 5 years ago. And the New York Times is just getting around to the news 5 years later.
And the U.S. Fauci was helping to fund it.
Yeah, Fauci and Francis Collins, both of them. Fauci and Francis Collins both got the ban lifted on it so that they could start funding gain of function research out of Wuhan Institute of Virology again, even though they knew that it was not up to the standards necessary to contain a virus that could be created.
Well, in fact, we are funding viral research in the most strategic opponent the United States has in the world. What?
Yeah, well, let's help them build a biological weapon. That's a great idea.
Yeah. What? I mean, you have to wonder about the motives of that. I mean, okay, curious scientists, but no, there's national security implications all over this.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And national security implications aside, the New York Times just flat out lied to everybody. They weren't badly misled. They were part of the mislead parade.
That's
And I
right.
wrote about it last week. And I was telling Andrew that it reminded me of one of my favorite scenes from the movie Throw Mama from the Train. And I think I may have even mentioned it in my post, but I couldn't find a clip of it. And Danny DeVito's character is has Billy Crystal there, but he's trying to convince Billy Crystal to kill his mother. It's a very funny riff on an Alfred Hitchcock film called Strangers on a Train. His mother walks in and says, "Who is that?" And Danny DeVito says, "Oh, this is cousin Billy." "You don't have a cousin Billy." And DeVito looks at Billy Crystal and says, "You lied to me," and hits him over the head with a frying pan. Well, the New York Times is Danny DeVito's character, Owen.
Yeah.
Owen. They are Owen in this. They're full of crap. They're absolutely full of crap. This whole thing is just absolutely intellectually dishonest in every single way. They were part of the cover-up. They were participating in it. They were enforcing it. They were part of the same squad that was trying to undermine scientists who were dissenting from the not just on origin of COVID-19, but also on the methodologies of dealing with it, like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and others. There were others that were part of that Great Barrington Declaration. And these guys don't even acknowledge that they were part of that problem. Well, we were badly misled. We were victims.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I would be embarrassed, but I can't feel a connection to them anymore.
It's a different paper.
It's a different paper. I had a wonderful, wonderful work, 26-year career there, and I enjoyed it. Went around the world and all of that, but the standards are just gone out the window. The honesty is gone.
Well, it has become simply a propaganda device, a propaganda platform. And the Washington Post is Jeff Bezos is at least starting to publicly question the direction that his paper has gone in. I don't know how serious that is. I mean, do you think Bezos is serious about revamping the Washington Post like Patrick Chung
Well,
has?
it's like, he's paid $200 million. It's like lunch money for him, but I think he's probably drifting towards being serious, but he really ignited a staff revolt and resignations and so forth with this. So it's he better be genuine about it because it's damaging his investment. I mean, in the short term.
Well, yes, yeah, it's a good point, right? I mean, why would you shake it out so that people are quitting right and left, unless you really just want to reduce the maybe that's part of it. Just wants to reduce the payroll because the payroll is just out of control over the Washington Post. If so, he's strategy.
Yeah, and the online they lost 500,000 online subscribers at one point, and then when a couple of people resigned, they lost a couple 100,000 more. It's the New York Times has figured it out about paying, and it's not just a newspaper anymore. It's an entertainment machine with games and recipes and all kinds of advice on personal living and so forth. They figured it out. They've got they're coming up on 10 million online subscribers, which is a nice chunk of change reliably when you can't really make that much money on newspapers anymore. And Wall Street Journal has been successful with the subscription mode. They started that right away. But the Washington Post is just having a terrible time and trying to keep up with its own narrative. Remember, they were counting daily the number of lies that Trump said. And they got up, I think, at 10 or 12,000 by the end of his first term. And then Joe Biden came along, Mr. Dishonesty, and they forgot how to count. So it's just become so corrupt and deceitful, and that's just hurting they're already cratering business model.
Speaking of Joe Biden, I got to ask about another news story that popped up before we get to your excellent columns. Right, I got to ask you about another news story that popped up. Did you hear that Joe Biden wants back in? He wants, and he's writing a memoir. Supposedly, he's writing a memoir, which is really interesting for a guy who's got so significant memory problems that Robert Hur said you couldn't even prosecute this guy.
Yeah.
he
doesn't. I mean, these guys don't write their own stuff on either side, and they get help. He wants back in, and I said, the conservatives can only hope that he comes back in, and the Democrats are like, oh no, go away. I mean, can you imagine the reason that they're in the crater right now? And he says, no, I'll come back and help. We go, yeah, we'll get back to you. Let's do lunch sometime.
Well, that this is Jill Biden that wants back in, and she wants to reinflate the Biden.
And she's doing a book too. Well, it's a money machine for them. They don't have to work at it. They just have to sit down and talk a long time with a ghostwriter, and the liberal publishers will pay them millions of dollars, and it won't really sell. But I mean, can you imagine? What are they now? $30? Can you imagine paying $30 for a hardback to hear what somebody says Joe Biden thinks, but it's pretending to be Joe Biden? I mean,
I like the idea. Somebody floated the idea that they should publish Joe Biden's memoir and all the pages be empty.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Most of these people don't write their own books. Barack Obama, I'm sure, didn't write his own memoirs. He might have written one.
That was the
William Ayers.
I forgot his
William Ayers.
Yeah.
Supposedly, William Ayers wrote the first book
about my dear beloved father.
Dreams from my father. Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, George W. Bush. They don't write their own books. They talk to ghostwriters, and ghostwriters write the books for them. It's not a secret. It's not even a pretense. It's just an accepted form of memoir writing. However, in each of those cases, that the person who actually ghost wrote the book talked to the person, and right?
Absolutely.
This is the stuff that they want in their book. They're recollecting it to somebody else to just format it properly for them so it looks good and it reads well. Does anybody think that the Joe Biden memoir is going to be Joe Biden's recollections? I mean, we can go back and read the Hur report at this point in time to get an idea of how much Joe Biden recollects at all anymore of the last several years, at least. Yeah. He couldn't even remember within, I think, 5 years when his own son passed away, which is tragic. I'm not making fun of that. It's tragic because this is a guy whose mental capacity is so diminished that he can't make those connections. He couldn't recall when exactly he was vice president. He was vice president for 8 years, and he couldn't recall the years that he was vice president accurately with Robert Hur.
It's like, well, that would be unpleasant to say. It's a bad memory, and I was hoping we'd gone by it, but let's see, probably 18 months or so. For Christmas, you can buy the compilation of Joe Biden's lies.
Oh. All right, we got to get to your columns.
Yeah.
If Joe Biden isn't going to stand up and be the leader of the Democrat Party, and he's not, well, who is? Is Rahm Emanuel the guy? I mean, I don't.
That's it. Yeah, this is a fun story, and I won't spoil all of it. But several decades ago, a Chicago politician showed up in my office and basically wanted to trade gossip and inside information on the Democrat machine for a lunch. And so we had a few lunches. Of course, what he really wanted was for me to write about him, and I didn't. And so he stopped coming around. Well, a while later, I read that he has become the national campaign finance chair for this Governor Bill Clinton, who wants to be president of the United States. And that was the beginning of what has become a stellar political career. It was Rahm Emanuel, who is one of the sharpest. Everybody pays attention to David Axelrod. They were all in the same Obama crew, but Rahm Emanuel was doing this in Chicago, where David Axelrod was a reporter, and I knew him. And Rahm Emanuel was inside the Clinton administration and then the Obama administration. He had 3 terms in Congress. He became the first Jewish mayor of Chicago. And he's got the sharpest mind politically and pointed. He's a good listener. He's very personable. He's crude, but very personable. And I've always been intrigued by him because I saw him back at the beginning of his career. So I finally wrote about him, and I said that in the column. I said, "Well, hey, Rahm, I'm finally writing about you." Just I was waiting for him to do something, you know. Well, what the potential attraction of Rahm Emanuel is that he's talking like Bill Clinton did. He's talking as a centrist Democrat, and he's counting on the progressives withering away in exile without their puppet, Joe. The fact that come 2028, pulling Democrats together by saying, we've got to get back to education and let's forget about all this bathroom stuff and so on. So Rahm is appearing on all the TV shows and stopping by, and does this sound familiar? Chatting politics with all kinds of DC reporters, the way he did with me in Chicago. And when you ask him, are you gonna run for president? He says, "I hope I'm not done with public service, and I hope public service is not done with me." In other words, yes, he's running.
Yeah. And I think Rahm actually is more center-ish.
Oh, he is. He is. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not a pretense.
And he's ruthless and vicious.
He got into death during Obama's administration. One of the reasons why he ended up getting shipped out, or not shipped out, but it's one of the reasons why he left to go run for mayor of Chicago, was because he had crossed swords too often with the progressives in Obama's camp, and he was, I think, really pushed out over it.
Yeah. To their detriment, I have to say. You could, if you saw, now one of the things I pointed out was he's short for a president. Our president's average 5'11". Trump is 6'3", Vance is 6'2", Lincoln was 6'4". James Madison was the shortest at 5'5", and Manuel is 5'7". So if you go by that, however, my theory, Ed, if you look at all the presidents, most presidents' names have 7 or less letters.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So Emmanuel comes up at 7, so it could work.
Well, it could work. Yeah.
Anyway, it was like a warning flag. Watch out for this guy because he's wily and he's smart.
Well, and again, I actually think that Rahm would be actually not a bad guy to get in there, except that I think he actually tends to be sort of a bad guy behavior. This is the guy who I think it was Elizabeth Boomiller at the New York Times in 1997, right? That's 28 years ago, when after Clinton won re-election, she described how he was at some sort of celebratory thing, and he was telling people that he was going to get his revenge on people who had tried to push Clinton out. And he was naming names, and he's plunging a knife in the table, going, "Dead, dead." It's sort of like Robert De Niro, right? In The Untouchables. I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want all of the people who know I'm dead. I want the people who live around him dead, sort of thing, you know. And that's Rahm. Rahm is, and
no, he's a tough guy, and I'm not suggesting he be president. I was waving a red flag that he could be. Now, then that would terminate the Trump legacy. So,
well, he could be, but I don't think in this Democrat Party he's ever going to get within reach of it. They're talking about AOC being the.
You think they're going to go back to that? I'm not so sure.
I don't
Bernie,
know.
Bernie and AOC are out on the trail now doing joint appearances. You say, well, yeah, progressives, let's go back and redo 2024. Well, wait a minute. That didn't work out so well.
I'm thinking that they have to lose another national election cycle before they start rising up, because it's not happening.
No. Yeah. Well, our parties are wonderful in the sense that they can morph. Now, you may remember there was a huge landslide, the biggest at the time. I think it was Lyndon Johnson in '64. He got 60% of the vote, or 62%, something like that. It was a huge landslide. And Reagan, of course, was great in '84. But in '64, Barry Goldwater was, an ultimate conservative, and he was 16 years too early. Anyway, Lyndon Johnson thumped the Republicans in '64, and 4 years later, everything fell apart for the Democrats, and Richard Nixon came in, and Republicans had 4 out of the next 5 terms. Let's see, Nixon 2, Reagan 2, and Bush, had 5 out of the next 6 terms.
Out of the next 6, the only one that was Jimmy Carter was the only one that wasn't.
Yeah. Right. So our parties can change and morph, and I don't, Democrats from the '60s wouldn't recognize the Democrats in this time. So they could change, and it's possible. And I'm not saying that Rahm would be. I mean, he would be the first Jewish president. I'm not saying he would be president, but I'm saying watch out, because he could certainly make the next president.
Yeah.
As he did with Clinton.
So, really briefly, your other column is Trump vows to catch up to China's growing naval fleet, which is, I mean, I think it's a good long-term strategy. The problem is I don't know that it's possible.
No, I agree with you. The dynamics of a democratic society with the Congress that changes hands, control every 2 years, and ships sometimes take 4 years and billions of dollars now to make. We're now right around 300 capital ships for the U.S. Navy, and the Chinese are passing 400. Now, it's hard to measure the technological advantage that we might have, but they would be fighting, if they go after Taiwan, they would be fighting in their own backyard, and we would have to go all the way across the Pacific to supply things. So it's a tough setup, and there's no guarantee that we want to defend Taiwan. When you take a look at what the U.S. is doing now after years of supporting Ukraine, if I was in Taiwan, I would not be buying a second house.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the and I think it's going to be soft power that deals with this. I don't think it's going to be hard power. And I think you're already starting to see that flex, right? We've pushed China out of the Panama Canal, or at least so far we've pushed them out of the Panama Canal. They may flex around Taiwan somewhat, but I suspect that this is going to be a situation in which economies compete more than militaries do, although there's going to be a military component to it. But we simply don't have the manufacturing capacity to build ships at the level
right. And the skilled workers. I mean, the pay can be good, but it's episodic. So, are you going to give up a nice job in tech, to come back to shipbuilding, but the program may end in 2 years? Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of the aerospace industry in Southern California in the 1970s and 1980s.
Yeah.
Is that you could make some really good money in there, but it was really contract driven. Not that you were working on contract, you'd be hired on, right? But if you're working for a contractor who loses a bid on something, there were a lot of layoffs in the aerospace industry. Let's put it that way. There were a lot of layoffs in the aerospace industry.
We just saw that Boeing got the contract over, was it Northrop, Lockheed?
Yeah, for the F-47.
Yeah.
Well, you're the prince of Twitter. I don't know if you saw what my response was on Twitter.
No.
I Boeing got that, and I said, well, that's a good thing because Boeing has an open door policy. And I got some people that pushed back on that just a tiny bit, but I was like, hey, it's true. Their doors open up, man. I mean, what can I say? Anyway, go read Andrew's column because both of Andrew's columns are both great. Trump vows to catch up to China's growing naval fleet. That was last Thursday. And from Sunday, Democrats have no one, or do they, for 2028. And he's writing about Rahm Emanuel. And all that's left right now, Andrew, is the jokes of the week. I understand you've got one. I got one for you.
I have one, yes. So there's this longtime JFK conspiracy theorist, and knowing that it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald, but he dies, and he gets to heaven, and God says, "Welcome. You can ask one question." And the conspiracy theorist says, "Well, who really killed John F. Kennedy?" And God says, J. Harvey Oswald shot him from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, and there was no one working with him. And the conspiracy theorist said, geez, this goes a lot higher than I thought.
It was all the way to the top, man. That's great. I love that. All right. I got one for you. This young woman is pregnant with her first child, and she goes to her obstetrician, for an exam, right? And the exam is over. She kind of is hemming and hawing. He says, well, is there something you want to ask me? She goes, well, it's a question that my husband wanted me to ask you. And the doctor goes, look, I know. I get this question all the time. Don't worry about it. Sex is fine until late in the pregnancy. And she goes, no, that's not it. He wanted to know if I could still mow the lawn.
That is a good one. I like that. Nate Bargatze, he's always telling stories about his wife, and he says, the guy that mows our lawn is my wife. And she insisted on it, and I said, okay, but you have to go to every single neighbor and explain that you want to.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this week. I won't be around next week, so it'll be 2 weeks before we get back together again to do our weekly look at politics. So be a week off next week. But Andrew, have yourself a wonderful fortnight, and we'll be back here in 2 weeks.
We'll do that. You have yourself a good week off or whatever it is. And thank you, folks. Thank you, Edward, as always, for all these years.